Married with Children may have redefined the American sitcom, shattering television's wholesome family illusions with brutal honesty and razor-sharp satire. But behind Ed O'Neill's iconic performance as Al Bundy was a cast marked by heartbreak, silence, and tragedy. Fame did not save them. In fact, it pushed many toward endings darker than any punchline the show ever delivered. For 11 groundbreaking seasons, the Bundy family became America's most dysfunctional household. Yet the real dysfunction unfolded far from the studio audience's laughter. Nearly 3 decades after the final episode aired, their stories remain so haunting that once you hear them, you'll never watch this classic the same way again. The show that dared to mock the American dream became a nightmare for those who lived it. Their personal battles waged in the shadows of sitcom success, their suffering hidden behind the canned laughter that made millions smile while they silently crumbled. Sam Kinison, the screaming prophet who couldn't escape his demons. Sam Kinison was born on December 8, 1953 in Yakima, Washington. He was 36 years old when he stepped into the role of Al's obnoxious professor, a recurring character whose manic energy perfectly matched Kinison's own volcanic stage presence. Before becoming one of America's most controversial stand-up comedians, Kinison had been a Pentecostal preacher, a past that informed his signature screaming delivery and gave his comedy an apocalyptic intensity that television had never witnessed. But behind the leather-clad rock and roll comedian persona lived a man tormented by addiction and self-destruction. Kinison's rise to fame in the mid-1980s was meteoric, fueled by cocaine, alcohol, and an anger that seemed to burn from some unreachable place deep within. His appearances on Married with Children were electric precisely because Kinison wasn't acting. He was channeling genuine rage, genuine pain, genuine chaos. His personal life mirrored his comedy: 3 failed marriages, constant substance abuse, and a reputation for excess that made even Hollywood veterans uncomfortable. The entertainment industry celebrated his boundary-breaking humor while quietly distancing themselves from the wreckage he left in his wake. As the years passed into the early 1990s, Kinison's self-destructive patterns intensified despite his professional success. His 4th marriage to Malika Soeri in 1992 seemed to offer hope for stability, yet the demons that had fueled his comedy refused to release their grip. On April 10, 1992, just days after his wedding, Kinison was traveling to a sold-out performance in Laughlin, Nevada, when his white Pontiac Trans Am was struck head-on by a pickup truck driven by 17-year-old Troy Pearson, who was driving drunk. Kinison was conscious after the impact, speaking to no one visible at the crash scene, reportedly having a conversation with an unseen presence before, saying, "I don't want to die, but why? Okay, okay, okay." Sam Kinison died on April 10, 1992, at the age of 38 from massive internal injuries sustained in the collision. The man who had screamed his fury at the world, who had made millions laugh at life's cruelest truths, was silenced on a desert highway by the same kind of reckless intoxication that had defined his existence. A tragic fate for someone whose comedy stripped away society's comfortable lies, only to become a casualty of the very darkness he'd spent his career illuminating. Amanda Bearse, the silent struggle behind Marcy's smile. Amanda Bearse was born on August 9, 1958, in Winter Park, Florida. She was 29 years old when she stepped into the role of Marcy Rhodes. Later, Marcy D'Arcy, the Bundys' feminist neighbor, whose battles with Al provided some of the show's sharpest comedic moments. Bearse arrived at Married with Children after establishing herself in soap operas and horror films, bringing a theatrical intensity that perfectly balanced the show's crude humor with surprising depth. Yet beneath the confident exterior of a working actress lay a woman carrying a secret that could have destroyed her career in the conservative Hollywood of the late 1980s. Bearse was living as a closeted lesbian during an era when LGBTQ+ representation was virtually non-existent in mainstream television, and coming out meant professional suicide. The psychological toll of maintaining this double life while playing a character in heterosexual relationships was immense. She watched her castmates form genuine friendships while she remained isolated by her secret, unable to fully connect with colleagues for fear of exposure. The strain manifested in ways invisible to viewers, but devastating to Bearse personally: anxiety, depression, and a profound loneliness that no amount of professional success could alleviate. As the years passed through the show's run, Bears made the courageous decision to come out publicly in 1993, becoming one of the first openly gay actresses on American television. The response was predictably brutal. While her castmates largely supported her, the industry's homophobia revealed itself in diminishing opportunities and typecasting that effectively ended her acting career. More painfully, her relationship with co-star Ed O'Neill deteriorated into a professional coldness that persisted for decades, with the two barely speaking off-camera, and O'Neill reportedly refusing to participate in show reunions where Bears was present. The woman who had stood her ground against Al Bundy's misogyny for 11 seasons found herself fighting a more insidious battle against an industry that celebrated her talent but rejected her authenticity. Amanda Bearse is alive today at 67 years old, but the career she deserved never materialized. She transitioned to directing, helming episodes of sitcoms while her contemporaries continued, acting into their later years. The cruel twist of her story isn't death but erasure, the slow disappearance from public consciousness of a talented actress whose honesty cost her everything the industry had promised. A tragic fate for someone who broke barriers, only to discover that pioneering often means sacrificing the very success that could have amplified your voice. David Garrison. The Broadway star broken by Hollywood's indifference. David Garrison was born on June 30, 1952 in Long Branch, New Jersey. He was 35 years old when he stepped into the role of Steve Rhodes, Marcy's long-suffering first husband, whose sanity slowly crumbled under the Bundy family's influence. Garrison was a Tony-nominated Broadway actor, a legitimate theater talent who brought Shakespearean training to a show that specialized in toilet humor and sexual innuendo, creating a character whose descent into madness felt disturbingly authentic. But behind Garrison's impeccable comic, timing was a man increasingly disillusioned with television and frustrated by Hollywood's disposability of serious actors. After 4 seasons of Married with Children, Garrison made the controversial decision to leave the show in 1990 to return to his first love, musical theater. What seemed like a principled artistic choice became a career miscalculation that would haunt him for decades. Hollywood doesn't forgive actors who walk away from hit shows, and Garrison found himself blacklisted from television opportunities that might have sustained him financially. His Broadway return yielded critical respect, but not the commercial success or financial security that television provided, leaving him in a professional limbo, too associated with sitcom comedy for serious theatrical consideration, yet too difficult for Hollywood after abandoning a popular series. As the years passed through the 1990s and 2000s, Garrison watched his former castmates, even those with smaller roles, receive reunion offers, nostalgia circuit appearances, and convention invitations while he was systematically excluded. The message was clear: Hollywood punishes independence. His marriage ended. His savings diminished. The Broadway roles grew smaller and less frequent. By the 2010s, Garrison had essentially disappeared from public view, his name absent from the nostalgia industrial complex that had enriched his former colleagues. The industry that had once valued his talent now demonstrated calculated indifference, as if his 4 seasons creating one of the show's most memorable characters had never existed. David Garrison is alive today at 73 years old, but his career never recovered from choosing art over commerce. He works occasionally in regional theater, far from the spotlight that once illuminated his considerable talent. The cruel irony of his story is that Steve Rhodes' on-screen nervous breakdown mirrored Garrison's real-life professional collapse. Both men broken by systems they couldn't control, both abandoned when they ceased being useful. A tragic fate for someone who valued artistic integrity, only to learn that integrity is a luxury Hollywood rarely rewards and never forgives. Ted McGinley, the replacement who could never replace the absence. Ted McGinley was born on May 30, 1958, in Newport Beach, California. He was 33 years old when he stepped into the role of Jefferson Darcy in 1991, Marcy's second husband and the man tasked with filling the void left by David Garrison's departure. McGinley arrived at Married with Children carrying an unfortunate reputation as television's show killer, having previously appeared in the final seasons of Happy Days and The Love Boat, a coincidence that superstitious industry insiders transformed into cruel mythology. Yet beneath the handsome, seemingly effortless charm that made McGinley a perfect fit for the vain, unemployed Jefferson was an actor. Shadowed by insecurity and the constant reminder that he was not the original choice, not the preferred option, merely the replacement. Every script, every scene, every episode carried the implicit message that he existed to fill space vacated by someone the writers had preferred. The psychological weight of being television's alleged harbinger of cancellation, combined with arriving at an established show where cast dynamics had solidified years earlier, created an isolation that McGinley masked with professionalism. He formed friendships with castmates, delivered consistent performances, and remained with the show until its 1997 conclusion, yet always with the awareness that his presence was born from another actor's rejection of the role. As the years passed after Married with Children ended, McGinley found steady work in television, appearing in numerous series without ever achieving the breakthrough role that would establish him as more than that guy from the later seasons. The show killer reputation followed him like a curse, writers and producers making jokes about the phenomenon even as they hired him, turning professional accomplishment into professional mockery. His marriage to Gigi Rice has endured, providing personal stability, yet the career that promised leading man stardom delivered dependable supporting roles in shows that rarely lasted beyond a few seasons, each cancellation adding weight to the superstition he couldn't escape. Ted McGinley is alive today at 67 years old, still working steadily in an industry that values his professionalism while never quite taking him seriously. The tragedy of his story isn't death or addiction, but diminishment. The slow recognition that talent and dedication guarantee nothing in an industry governed by perception and mythology. A cruel twist for someone who did everything right, only to discover that timing and circumstances beyond his control would define his career more than any performance ever could. Katey Sagal, the woman who buried her pain beneath Peg's laughter. Katey Sagal was born on January 19, 1954, in Los Angeles, California. She was 33 years old when she stepped into the role of Peggy Bundy, the big-haired leopard print-wearing housewife whose refusal to cook, clean, or care became feminist iconoclasm disguised as lazy selfishness. Sagal came from Hollywood royalty. Her father was a television director, her mother a singer. Yet her path to stardom was marked by rejection, near misses, and the quiet desperation of an actress who had spent years almost achieving success. But behind Peggy's exaggerated sexuality and comic indifference lived a woman carrying grief so profound it threatened to destroy her. In 1991, during the show's sixth season, Sagal was 7 months pregnant when she went into labor prematurely. Her daughter was stillborn. The devastation was absolute, yet the demands of television production allowed no space for proper mourning. The show had written Peggy's pregnancy into the storyline, and now scripts needed rewriting, episodes needed reshooting, and Sagal needed to return to work before her body or mind had healed. The producers handled the tragedy with a surreal narrative twist, revealing the entire pregnancy as Peg's dream, erasing Sagal's real-life loss with sitcom convenience. She returned to the set wearing Peggy's outrageous costumes, delivering sexual innuendos and insults, dying inside while making millions laugh. As the years passed through the 1990s and into the 2000s, Sagal's career flourished in ways that seemed to validate her suffering. Roles in 8 Simple Rules and Sons of Anarchy finally gave her the dramatic recognition she'd always deserved. Yet personal tragedy continued stalking her. In 2021, she was struck by a car while crossing a street in Los Angeles, suffering serious injuries that required hospitalization. The randomness of it, the nearness of death after decades of survival seemed cosmically cruel. She had endured stillbirth, industry rejection, typecasting, and the psychological toll of performing comedy while grieving, only to face mortality on an ordinary afternoon from a driver who didn't see her. Katey Sagal is alive today at 72 years old, still working and still surviving. but the woman who made us laugh as Peggy Bundy carried sorrows that no comedy could ever address, buried pain beneath bouffant wigs and spandex, and learned that Hollywood's empathy extends only as far as the next episode's delivery. A tragic fate for someone whose talent deserves celebration without suffering, whose strength was tested in ways no performance could prepare her for, whose losses became footnotes in a career defined by resilience that no one should ever have to demonstrate. Christina Applegate, the child star who couldn't outrun her body's betrayal. Christina Applegate was born on November 25, 1971 in Hollywood, California. She was 15 years old when she stepped into the role of Kelly Bundy, the beautiful, magnificently stupid daughter whose character became both iconic and controversial. A teenage girl reduced to dumb blonde jokes in an era before non-Me Too consciousness could interrogate such exploitation. Applegate grew up on the Married with Children set, her adolescence documented by cameras, her sexuality commodified before she was old enough to consent to such objectification. Yet beneath the bubbly exterior and seemingly effortless comedic timing lived a young woman navigating trauma, invisible to audiences who saw only Kelly's ditzy charm. Applegate has spoken about the inappropriate sexualization she experienced as a teenage actress, the uncomfortable costumes, the jokes that made her body the punchline, the male gaze that transformed her from child to commodity without her permission. The psychological damage of such premature sexualization manifested in ways she couldn't articulate at the time: disordered eating, relationship difficulties, a persistent sense that her value existed only in her appearance and willingness to be the joke. The show that made her famous also robbed her of a normal adolescence, replacing teenage experimentation with professional obligation and public scrutiny. As the years passed into the 2000s, Applegate successfully transitioned from child star to respected actress, earning Emmy nominations and critical acclaim while advocating for breast cancer awareness after her own diagnosis and double mastectomy in 2008. She had survived the industry's exploitation, overcome typecasting, and built a career on her terms. Then came the diagnosis that would redefine everything. In August 2021, Applegate revealed she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a progressive neurological disease that would slowly rob her of mobility, coordination, and independence. The cruelty was staggering. An actress whose physical comedy had delighted millions, whose beauty had been commodified and exploited, now facing a disease that attacks the body's ability to move, to function, to exist without pain. Christina Applegate is alive today at 54 years old, but the MS progresses relentlessly. She now walks with a cane, has publicly discussed the disease's devastating effects on her mental health, and has acknowledged that her acting career is likely over. The woman who danced and moved with such effortless grace as Kelly Bundy now struggles with basic mobility, her body betraying her in ways that feel like cosmic punishment for a childhood spent being reduced to her physical appearance. A heartbreaking decline for someone who gave her youth to an industry that took everything and offered little protection, whose talent deserved a different ending, whose suffering continues while the laughter from those 11 seasons echoes eternally in syndication. Ed O'Neill, the patriarch haunted by what he almost lost. Ed O'Neill was born on April 12, 1946 in Youngstown, Ohio. He was 41 years old when he stepped into the role of Al Bundy, the bitter shoe salesman whose glory days peaked in high school and whose present existence was defined by disappointment,